What's up, everybody? Jensen Cummings here. Thank you, as always, for tuning in. Today is Best Served Podcast 209, and we're talking what it would be like if you could make pilts every day. The dream of our guest, Ashleigh Carter of Bierstadt Lagerhaus. Ashleigh, thanks for being on.
Thank you so much for having me. I've really enjoyed watching your other podcasts. So, it's a pleasure to be on.
I'm fired up about this channel, Best Served Chilled. Anybody who knows me, certified Cicerone since back in 2012 and been in the beer and food, kind of bringing those things together for a long time. Actually worked with Ashleigh and Bill and Chris Rippey and Brandon Muncie on the build out and concept development there. So I'm excited that we get to come back years later and kind of talk about what you have built, which is amazing. So for anybody who does not know of Bierstadt Lagerhaus, you must not like beer. But tell everybody who doesn't know, kind of like, where you guys at? What can people expect when they kind of get one of your beers when they come to your spot?
Yeah, we are a little bit different than a lot of breweries you might find. We like to focus on one thing. So we are a all lager house. So we focus on a very narrow style, specifically German lagers. And we're located right downtown, right in the Rhino Arts District, about 9 blocks or so from the baseball stadium when there, used to be baseball, I guess. And, we literally are just committed to trying to do one thing perfectly. And we have a food as well, which is really nice, a nice big, event space. And we try to do things very traditionally in the beer sense, but we don't actually do things very traditionally necessarily in the way that we run our restaurant, run our concept. We don't want it to be Disneyland, so these things have to feel really natural. They have to feel very much like they're part of us, and we don't just do things just to be true to something, just, because we've decided we're the German place or something.
Yeah, I like it because there's this almost like highbrow, lowbrow thing where, Chris Rippey is just a goofy, playful, great operator where it's like fast and loose and fun. And then you have very thoughtful,
fast and loose and fun,
up, really proper glassware. So I like the kind of the dichotomy of it. I think it's an interesting thing from a brand positioning standpoint. I think you guys have done a really good job of that, of being this place where you can have like Reinheitsgebot, like to the letter, and you can have something playful and kind of that banter and playfulness back and forth. So I want to get back into that. We'll talk about that. I want to take people back for you though. Personally, when did you first get into the industry? When did you start getting connected with craft beer?
Yeah, I grew up in Colorado, so I'm actually a native. Which,
wow, so
actually, my mom's a native too. So how about that? Double whammy.
Second generation native.
Yeah, second. So we got here. Like I grew up in Colorado. I went to Grandview High School. I played soccer there. I went to college in Asheville, North Carolina. Played Division I soccer there. Got my degree in pure mathematics. And if you know anything about Asheville, it's a pretty cool beer town, like it wasn't as big then for sure, but it was starting to develop kind of like Denver was at the time. And weirdly enough, my age group, so I'm 35, is that my parents, who are not that old, were not necessarily into craft beer, but were at least familiar with craft beer. And I think my generation is one of the first, and our generation is one of the first where we had a knowing about it even before, we were necessarily drinking, which I think is completely different than from previous generations, which I think you already have a baseline. I knew what Fat Tire was at Old Chicago, before I really even knew what like Busch Light was, right? Like I never drank it or anything, but it was something that I was familiar with. And so growing up and going to Asheville, same thing, we had the Asheville Brewing Company there, and there's a couple other breweries, and we definitely drank our fair share of, bathtubs of Busch Light naturally. But it was like, oh, we could buy something else good. So that was kind of where it started to like tickle this idea that beer wasn't just this, pale, yellow, mass-produced thing.
Yes.
So I didn't really know what I wanted to do after college, per se. I went into coaching for a little while. I lived in Michigan, which is also another craft beer place, drinking, Founders and Bells and stuff like that. And then up in Poughkeepsie, New York, which there is not anything up there. But I moved back home at 26 or so, 24, something like that. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. So I moved back in with my mom, got a job as a barista, kind of just started like, well, beer's kind of cool. Started home brewing. And I was like, you know what? I really like this. I should try to see, what's up, like how how can I, is this something like more than just a hobby? I'm not really like a hobbyist per se. Like I don't do stuff on the side.
You don't
I do
collect
one.
knickknacks?
No, I'm not a knickknack. I like hang out with my dogs, and I mean I like cook a lot at home, but even then, it's pretty like intense. It's never just to do it. So when I moved back, I was familiar with the brewing company Dry Dock, which is down in Aurora, and my dad actually lived down there, and I had an alt beer there, and that alt beer to me was like kind of like I wouldn't go as far as life changing per se, but like
Pretty
it
damn
was
close.
something. Yeah, it was something different. Like
Mm-hmm.
we were kind of like on the crazy spectrum. We were drinking like a Beta purple haze, fruit beer stuff.
Yeah.
And like when I was thinking about developing beers myself, it was all about like what ingredients can we put in it or how crazy can we make this? And alt beer stood out to me because it had all of the hallmarks of drinkability and balance, really. And it was nothing in it but yeast, malt, hops, and water. And so having a flavorful beer that wasn't necessarily like some micro or some macro, brewed thing, but actually had some color and had some flavor to it, really stood out to me as something like, okay, I really want to learn more about like this specifically. So I asked for a job there, basically. Thought I
Nice.
might be able to bartend.
Well, hold on. Before we get into more of the
Yeah.
job, alt beer, because I
Yeah.
think that gateway drug, and I love two of my gateway drug beers were Fat Tire. I actually remember driving across state lines before it was
Oh my
available in
God.
every state, and then Two Hearted. So I appreciate that. The alt beer really, really changed your perspective. And alt beer is such a simple beer, and it's interesting. So tell people what alt beer is, right? Dusseldorf, and it's interesting. There's like across the river, people know of Kolsch, I think, a lot more. There's this like battle between these cities that are right next to each other
Oh
that
man,
both have some of the most iconic beers in the world. But alt beer, people aren't familiar with that. Tell people what that style of beer actually is.
it's a different. I kind of like think of alt beer, even Kolsch too, akin to like pale ale. It's not necessarily one thing per se. You can kind of like one of them's pale, Kolsch is pale, and alt beer is darker, more amber colored. But they can really range in biscuity, crackery, to more hoppy, to sweeter and maltier. Just like it's not one thing. Like yes, they only make alt beer in Dusseldorf. They only make Kolsch in Cologne, which is actually super funny. There's this comic actually, and they each have one in each city where there's a horse drinking alt beer and pissing Kolsch.
Yeah.
And like in Cologne, they have the opposite of that. So it's like this really weird, like, oh, and it's not lager. It's something in between that, but. It is a eminently balanced beer, really. Like there's enough yeast character to it. I like mine more bitter. I have not gotten the opportunity to go to Dusseldorf and Cologne, which is unfortunate. I was supposed to go this year, but here we are. 2020, man, it's just ruining plans. But like the idea that you just drink this one thing and this one thing only is kind of fascinating. It's a cultural thing that we in the United States just can't wrap our heads around. We love choice, and we love the paradox of choice, really, and we love being debilitated by choice, honestly. So, alt beer, man.
I can't wait till you go. We have to talk again when you go because it's so funny. They do have this like brotherly kind of rivalry thing going, and people will ask you which is your favorite. I was like, yes, I like both.
Yeah,
sitting on the river in Cologne and drinking right in like the shadow of the Gothic steeples is like super cool. And then you go to the other side and you go to these like dark, more dank, like
more industrial,
basically in Dusseldorf, and you drink alt and like a ridiculous amount. They bring them on these trays, and there's like
the
12 of
stances,
them.
like
You're grabbing beer off of them. You didn't even order it. They're just walking around like this. Anyway, I
want to go so badly.
Everybody has to go because it's two of the like premier beer cities in the world, even though they only have one beer each.
Mm-hmm. It's amazing.
So
I love
and I
it.
keep down that all day. I absolutely love it. But let's get back. Dry Dock. Dry Dock is an important brewery in Colorado across the board. It was second wave, right? It wasn't New Belgium and some of those first wave, but an absolutely second wave of just the explosion of craft beer. And Kevin and the whole crew there, and they had the homebrew shop. And so there was like, it's just like a very different feel to it. Why was that an important place for you to kind of cut your teeth?
Well, it was really close to my dad's house, which was helpful. And they had like really solid beers. And at the time, my current partner, Bill was the head brewer there. So, going there and seeing like, and it was before, you're right, it was second wave, but it wasn't quite, the craziest thing on there was like apricot blonde, vanilla porter, like that was considered kind of like out there a little bit.
Yeah.
Where, and it was kind of like one of the first tasting rooms really in the state. It kind of helped spawn that kind of idea. There's a bunch of things working with it, but having the homebrew store next door really gave you kind of this built-in kind of audience, where you could see everything. Like you walk in, you can see the brew house, the people next door, that's where they actually ended up putting me to work at instead of a bartender, is at the homebrew store. So like having that intimate relationship between the home brewers and the professional brewery, and a truly professional brewery, when they did their upgrade, I believe in 2008 or 2009, from like a more of a pots and pans system to an actual brew house, it really helped upgrade this, this bigger step between home brewing and professional brewing, while still keeping it close enough and accessible enough for people to like wrap their heads around, I guess. And, the added idea that when I was working at the brew hut, or even when I was working in the brewery after the brew hut, that people would walk back and forth and you could ask questions of the brewer, and I just think that helps bring people in. And I think homebrewers honestly get a bad rap, and I can find some of them to be very hard and tedious and kind of annoying, but the real thing is they keep some of these things alive.
Yes.
And some of these styles and stuff alive that I think would be lost if we just left it to just having a strictly professional realm to live in. So, I think it's a really good play back and forth with the two. So
yeah, because you don't have to think about what's going to sell, right? You're not thinking about the trends of the market. So do you remember the first batch of beer that you got to brew?
So the first batch I brewed at home was a Alaskan Amber clone, which was an alt beer, basically.
Yeah.
All grain from the beginning. I only made like 5 beers at home, to be honest with you, because I kind of sucked at it. You can't control anything, oxygen, temperature, like all these things that are really important.
Yes, and you're a control freak. That's why you have your system
freak
now. It makes sense. Also, your competitive nature from the soccer, the D1 soccer, and then coaching. This now makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
To me as well. What about on the professional system? What's the first beer you got to brew there?
I made, first one I mashed in all by myself was the 7 Seas, which was now it's not called anymore. It's the double IPA at Dry Dock. And I got there in the morning all by myself, mashed it by myself. Bill got in later. It's a funny story, actually. He was at a System of a Down concert the night before. I've never seen somebody so painfully hungover and hurt in my entire life.
Awesome.
And he walks in and he's just like ghost white, just like you can just hear the dehydration, smell the alcohol, like so funny. But that was the first beer I actually made by myself there. The first beer that I actually made that was my recipe was just like a copper colored amber ale type thing. Bill always told me, 3 malts, 2 hops, and under 5.5%, and that's how good of a brewer people can tell you are. You can put a lot of stuff in something and cover it up and add a bunch of junk to it, but that's not going to showcase what kind of a brewer you are or how clean you can make a beer or, any of these things. So keeping it simple was a big deal. I didn't really ever make anything crazy.
Yeah, there's nowhere to hide, I think, in that style. So I want to move people forward a little bit, because then you and Bill developed kind of the whole beer system for Prost, right? In Denver. And Prost was an important brewery too, because now we just kind of see lagers. They're pretty ubiquitous. Some people have a lager, like it's a normal thing. But when that started, it was not a normal thing. Breweries did not have lagers. Brewery definitely did not have German style, very traditional lagers on, if they even did have a lager. So why was it important to kind of start that brewery? Was Denver looking for it? Did you guys have to fight to get that into the market? Give us a little of those early days of starting an all German style, lager focused brewery.
Yeah, so actually gives a lot of credit to Bill. That's something he's wanted to do for a very, very long time, and that's part of the reason why we fell in together. Is because he had this passion for German styles. Really, he traveled to Germany and wanted to learn how to make these, and it seemed like a natural extension for me, just based on what I like to drink. The kind of obsessive compulsive nature I have about beer, the perfectionist thing, and so we just kind of fit together like that. We kind of just came together on that thing. So he got the opportunity to open up Prost, and he went to Germany and found the brew house, and then I helped him put it together and assemble it. He took me over from Dry Dock to help start Prost. At that time, it was definitely weird. People thought that he was insane,
Yeah.
literally. I mean, Troy Casey was like, I don't see how you're ever going to be able to make this. It was a really big brew house. I don't think you're ever going to be able to do this. He literally said that straight up, basically like that.
Wow.
Um, and somehow we did it. We learned a lot, and it was definitely the basis for what we have here, which is better, the way we put it together. And we're making only the things that we want, and there's less of a, Chris Rippey's a 1,000 times better business partner. We'll get into the details of that, but it didn't end very well.
Sure.
While I'm thankful that we were there, I'm very happy about what we have now, and I do know that was a stepping stone for what we have now, and really practicing some of the things that we knew were possible based on literature and seeing them in person, to actually putting them into place, to actually then expanding on that when we when we opened up Bierstadt, to actually do it exactly right and properly from the beginning, and not just trying to piece it together, fighting against people that necessarily didn't feel as strongly
Sure.
about the tradition as we did.
So I want to go to Bierstadt now, and I want to go right to a beer in and of itself, because it really is this. You can talk about no flair, no twist, no added things, just tradition. And so I want to talk about slow pour pills.
Yeah.
And we joke, it's like, oh, it was my dream if I could just make pills every day. And so this is such a unique beer. It's such a beer that you now are pushing against two expectations in the market. One, what a lager is, and a German style lager moreover. And two, the expectation of beer being quick. And so I want you to talk about that beer, and let's just get into it. Start wherever the story needs to start on Pilz, and I'll pull in on a couple threads, because I think it's an important beer for people to understand that there's just a different expectation when you drink that beer than when you drink a lot of other beers, especially lagers.
Yeah, I think, okay, so overarching, I always think that you should be making your favorite beer. There's a lot of brewers out there that and I'm not, it's not to rag on people or whatever. It is just to say that if you're not trying to make your favorite beer, what are you doing? Why are you doing it? Why do you slave over these things? This job has no money and no benefits. Like, it is, if you're not at least drinking the thing that you want to be drinking, if you don't have your desert island beer, at least, in your top tier of desert island beers, if you're not making it, you should change what you're doing. Now, luckily, my desert island beer happens to be a pale lager, and it's not some like gummy worm rosemary saison or something, right? Like, so maybe there is a more of a market for my desert island beer, of course. So that beer was something that a recipe that Bill had been making for a while, and we took that recipe basically, and we used every technique that you could possibly use on it. German beer, lager beer especially, is so technique driven, not necessarily recipe driven, that there's all these things, these nuances in it. So that beer in particular should be dry, should be snappy. I know it's kind of hard to like. I think the hop character should be kind of dusty and subtle. It's not like a hop stack hitting you in the face. It's a much more subtle, nuanced beer than people really think about beer. They always want it to hit them in the face right away. And then the idea of what it is, like the all-encompassing. It's not just a pills, but we call it slow pour pills. That's actually the name of it. We've had to send a couple cease and desist to people because it is actually the name of the beer.
Gotcha.
It does refer to how it's poured. So it is a 3 to 5 minute pour that's basically stacked foam What that does is help degas the beer slightly. It's a very carbonated beer, which I think helps release some of the hop aroma and helps build some of the head proteins. That beer is an experience, and we do sell it around town, and it is part of the reason why we require people to serve it in the glass. So when you get it, it always comes in its proper glass. If these guys weren't busy down there, I'd make them pour me one right now. But it is all about like how you want something to be presented. Like everything, like you can eat a steak, right? Eating a steak, you can eat a steak at home. You can buy a steak, you can cook it pretty well. But there's something about going out for a steak, right? And it's how that it's served, and it's the way it's presented. Like a steak is still a steak if it's served in a dog bowl, but it's not the same as being cut a specific way, right? Why do you serve the bone with one of those big tomahawk steaks? Like it's all part of the presentation, it's all part of how you consume it. And you consume things with your eyes, with your taste buds, and that's the way I like to drink that beer. So people always say, like, why would you make people, like, you guys are busy, like, why don't you start fast pouring it or yada yada? And my thing is, I respect our customers enough to give them the experience that I want to have. So why would I hold that from them when that's the experience that I love having? And why would I have the bartender pour my beer like that and have everybody else's beer poured a separate way? So it's about giving that experience to people, and not everything has to be in such a hurry. Things are worth the wait. It's worth the experience. And, it should be something. It should show up. It's a very photographed beer, which I love. So I love seeing pictures of it in places.
There's a couple things I need to unpack this for people. We're going to stay on this beer for a while because I think it's important. All right. So the one thing that I can tell you absolutely is that the beer tastes different when it's poured over 3, 4, 5 minutes than if it's poured in 41 seconds. I can just tell you, like we did a lot of side by side, and it really, really makes a difference. And so the one thing I tell people is, like, if you're a Guinness drinker, you know that it takes a certain amount of time because you're building that beer. And so I think that's really important for people to understand. I know it was a challenge early on getting into bars and restaurants because they just had to go fast, slow. And the slow part is really, really hard. And so the other thing that I really like from just the quality standpoint, but then also a brand standpoint, you just mentioned it's photographed. You guys have really nice glassware. It is ridiculously expensive. You've seen the price tag of the purchase order of some of those, yet everybody takes a picture of it. And so your brand goes everywhere because people are like, I waited 5 minutes for this. I'm taking a damn picture of it. And it says Bierstadt down the side of it, right? And it has the doily on it. And so I think the brand consistency and the consistency of the beer super important. I want people, a lot of like professional brewers and people in food and beverage watch this show. You need to pay attention to that because it is creating consistency, expectation on the food and beverage side, on the consumer side, and on the brand side. These are all things that we don't do a good enough job of, I think, across the board. And so
I think of it as, sorry to interrupt. I think of it as like the McDonald's effect, right? When you see the photograph on the website, or when you see the photograph of it, like when I've given you our best, when you do your beauty shots, that is what it should look like when it comes to you.
Yes.
Like that to me is like at the heart of craft. It's just not the way that you make it. It's the way that it's dispensed and served. There's a reason why, chefs take, the time to plate things. Like it is a plating to a certain extent. You can mess up the beer in that last moment, all that hard work you put into it, and then you let it be served in a shit-lined shoe. Like I don't understand why you would do that.
Yes.
It's hard to get everybody necessarily to be on the full slow pour thing, and that's okay. We're still working hard at that. But even just the glass, and then from our perspective, yes, the glassware is expensive. However, people don't really, we want them to pay attention to what they're drinking, but they're not. They're not paying attention necessarily. And it's hard to ask them to. There's a lot of things going on. Shit, like I can't even remember if I brushed my teeth this morning,
Yep.
Like I understand. So having that glass reinforcement of all our beers, so even if you get our Hellas around town too, it's in its specific glass, which kind of looks like this right here. Mm-hmm. It's just that reinforcement. If somebody gets it again, they go, oh, I've had this before. So it's just that ability to reinforce that, and people don't necessarily understand what they're drinking or what they're doing until they've had it in their hand a few times.
It's that brand
sorry to interrupt you.
No, that's perfect. I mean, literally, that's exactly something that we talk about a lot, and I think it's so important. You know, the quality very different than McDonald's, yet the arches, they're just timeless, and so you're trying to create that timelessness. I think is important, especially for you. You're actually trying to capture moments in time with how historical a lot of these styles of beer are. So I think it's a really, really important positioning. But yeah, people just come to expect something. And if you deliver on an expectation again and again and again, people recognize that. That's how you build brand. That's how you build reputation. And I think it's really important. I think we don't pay attention to enough. We're trying to get the next beer in the glass every time versus what's in that one glass every time really, really matters. So I appreciate that. You know, and I know you and Bill have to be militant about it. You have to
Yeah,
be.
not as much anymore, man. Our bartenders are so good anymore
I
that
love
they're
it.
just like they take a lot of pride in it too. Like when
Yeah.
they see it, you know, I think the first Great American Beer Festival we had here was a really eye-opening experience for them. You know, we're 4 years old now. We opened in 2016. But that first Great American Beer Festival where people were like shoveling in here and they were all industry people and them serving that beer. And I literally saw a guy, you know, he's with a brewer. They order one of everything or whatever, right? The tray of beers comes. It all's got the perfect amount of foam on it. The beers are perfectly bright. They're all served in their individual glassware. The server sets all the beers down, set it with the labels facing out towards people. Like it's just those little things, right? And the guy literally stands up, puts his glasses on, is like, where the fuck am I? Like, this is not a normal experience to have at a brewery, especially a new one. And then one of the
Right.
best compliments I ever got was from Tommy Arthur. He came there one day and he like called me over or whatever. He goes, I was here before and I was worried that the next time I came back, it wouldn't be the same. That was a one-time experience that that experience couldn't be replicated, that it would, you know, fall back into the easy way that it is. And to have it be the same and the beer be of the same quality and to be the presentation to be the same is all, you know, very much the same was it was kind of a nice thing. And that's why we continue to be busier and busier, you know, especially among industry people, I
Oh,
think, because they
Ashley,
don't think it can be done.
I mean, Tommy Arthur, for anybody who doesn't know, again, you don't like beer, right? Port Brewing, one of the most award-winning beer breweries ever, and then Lost Abbey, what at the forefront, kind of like Russian River and a few others at mixed culture, fruited beers, things like that. So to have Tommy say that, and it's interesting because he had a great experience the first time, and as an operator, his first thing was like, "Oh shit, you can't do that again." That was like now because the problem is if you set the bar high, you can't slip at all because people
Nope.
are actually looking for you to slip. Now you're in a it's a paradox of a different kind that you're talking about. Now you
Mm-hmm.
set yourself up for success or for more failure. And so
Mm-hmm.
I could see he's just like, oh no, they can't do this again. It was too good. And you did it again. And that consistency I think is important. So I appreciate this.
We poured like 14 or 1500 pills at 5 minutes apiece in
Like,
one day. Like we did it. Like I didn't do it. Our staff did it. Like they crushed it. Like they take so much pride in it. They love that first moment when they set it down. You know, that idea, like I said, the little things, just serving the logo out. Like these things, we're not really good at marketing. I'm going to tell you that right now. I'm garbage at it. Like our Instagram is just okay. Like, but what we do is make sure that when you come here, the experience is a specific way.
yeah.
And it's hard to, you know, show that to people without sounding like you're being cheesy, I guess.
Yeah, I completely agree. You're good at brand marketing is
Yeah.
your thing for sure. So I love this. And speaking of like Tommy Arthur and just people in the industry and having that, or even someone like Troy, like unbelievably successful brewer as well. And then he went on a very different path as well, which I think is funny. Not your path, but talking mixed culture, barrel sour beer when people are like, wait, and in Glenwood Springs. So maybe there was a little inspiration there saying, oh, you can go out on a scary branch in this industry now. So I really appreciate that. We got to talk about Bess Doherty for a second because on the
Yeah,
show,
that's great.
amazing, grateful gnome, just boss, absolute boss, and said you got to get Ashleigh on. And so this show is built on good people connecting good people. And Bess said Ashleigh and has to be on the show. I was like, yes, of course she does. So I really, really appreciate that. Having that camaraderie with other brewers. Why is that so important, and especially with somebody like Bess?
Oh man, you know, the camaraderie is it's never become more apparent as being important. than now, you know, especially since we don't get to lean on each other as hard necessarily. It's just the idea of being able to ask a question, trying to find something, just being able to just tell somebody like, yeah, I had a really bad day. Like all these three things went wrong, and you know exactly what they're talking about. Like, oh yeah, I've definitely had that happen before. That's totally shitty.
Yeah.
Let's have a beer. Let's talk about something. You know, let's talk about why we make beer. Let's talk about like the nitty gritty. Like that woman is an incredibly crazy hard worker. Like
Yeah.
I don't know how she holds it all together. I think she'd probably tell you the same thing as we all would, that you know sometimes it seems a little bit overwhelming, but the way that she's just handled that place and a new place and really stepping into a lot of areas that she doesn't necessarily have expertise in. She's just, I mean, she's a great human.
Yeah, and I love this too. That somebody else who gave a shout out to, Avery Swanson, who, you know, when we met, she was at Jester King. We did some fun stuff with them. Unbelievable, like really set the tone. And yeah, keeping together is doing some great things, like an absolute dynamo in the industry. I also think it's important because like this is a dude with beard industry. There's like no doubt about it. And so, you know, to have not just talented female brewers, literally we're talking about some of the most talented brewers, full stop. Yourself, Avery, Bess, right? And this is an important distinction to make. So somebody like Avery, you know, that's out there kind of leading the way in other ways than you are. What's it like to have somebody like Avery kind of in your corner as well?
Yeah, I mean, it's weird. Her and I knew of each other before we knew each other, and we actually were at Big Beers, and we like passed by, and I was like, "Wait, aren't you?" She's like, "Wait, aren't you?" And I was like, and we just like kind of hit it off right away. And we have some designs, hopefully, one day to do something together, like a collaboration of sorts. But it kind of has to be pretty organic, so it's hard to force those things. I'm really sad I haven't gotten to like see her and catch up a bit. We saw each other in Maine last year, and we will, you know, message back and forth once in a while. She's supposed to drop me off some beer soon. I'm very excited to try it. But I was hoping to go out there and see her spot, you know, what she's doing out there, which I think is not just cool, but you know, stepping out on a limb, taking something from a brewery that's really well known and leaving it. Like I think it's amazing. I've listened to all her podcasts. I try to do a really good job, and I think it's important for all of us to really listen to all the, especially right now, all the podcasts, all the interviews people give, and you really get a sense of who these people really are. They like shining on people that you maybe don't know but want to know more about. So I always encourage people. I listen to everybody I know's podcasts. Everybody, like if I know you, I've listened to it, and I try to reach out to people, let them know like that I have listened to it, and like I think that kind of like underlying support for one another is really important. Because you really get to know, like maybe I haven't said that out loud, or maybe I was thinking that, or you know, how they're going to be the most vulnerable. And I try not to shine, you know, anybody on or anything on. So really listening to, you know, how she left there and you know starting a whole new thing has been a cool, you know, inspiring thing for me to kind of be like, yeah, girl, go get it.
Yeah, go get it. Yeah,
Go get
Chicago.
it. Go do what you
Chicago
want,
is
man.
lucky to have what they're doing out there. And then one last person, very important person to both of us, Chris Johnson from Green Bench, one of the most creative, thoughtful brewers that I've ever come across. The collaboration beer that we did with them through Good Bugs was one of my favorites ever. Just he thinks different. He just thinks different, and I really appreciate that. Speaking of podcasts, he was on a podcast that I was listening to, and him and I were bantering, and he was talking about you and just his like, I just like am siphoning superpowers from Ashleigh at any moment when it comes to lager, and he's crazy talented, yet he's just like, no, I couldn't make a lager to save my life if it wasn't for Ashleigh. We both know that guy could crush lagers.
Yeah, you know it.
But acknowledgement is important. It's the bedrock of the show. It's why we just spent the last 7 minutes talking about other humans that are part of your journey, and I think it's important. So Chris Johnson, Green Bench, like having a conversation with somebody you know is as talented as you that's saying, please help me. It's like, it's kind of cool. And at the same time,
cool.
We're on the same level. So talk about Chris Johnson for a moment.
Yeah, you know, he's just a really, and I think it's hard to come by a little bit, a very deliberate person. He's very honest. He's very, you know, forthcoming. He's very outright. He's very easy to talk to. He's thoughtful. You can see it, you know, I got to be there when they first opened Webs, the Web City Cellar. Cool. He had all of our beers on tap actually there. It was like the first event there, which was really amazing. And just like being around somebody that like I said, just who wants to know more and wants to become a better brewer, is not trying to use it for some marketing thing or use it for whatever, like wants to use it in order to improve what they're doing. And, I'm in cans now, which really horrifies me. So, I've been like, are these taste okay? And I shipped them some beer, and having that kind of like just the ability to go back and forth. And I'm on my text messaging all the time, trying to just make sure all my friends are okay, and especially, with the social climate right now, it's really important to make sure that, we're supporting people out loud and not just, undercover.
Yes. What a way to end. It's so important. The collaborative spirit of craft beer has been the most compelling thing since my first fat tire, to driving across state lines, to drinking every beer around the world at Old Chicago because there was no other craft beer at the time, to the opportunity to collaborate with brewers, to be a part of developing, the Rack House part of Bierstadt Lagerhaus. All these things really matter. It's what's always kept me really focused on, like, there's just good people. Like, almost too many collaboration beers. A lot of brewers will tell you, you just want to, like, immerse yourself with your friends, with your contemporaries. And sometimes being a brewer is lonely as hell. So I really appreciate kind of that. And for me, this has just been like hustle and communicate. I mean, 209 episodes since
That's amazing.
March. Every day, like, let's go. It's so important for us to communicate, and I really appreciate that you're doing that at every level with your beer and behind the scenes as well. So Ashleigh, thank you for being on the show.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for having me. You have to come get some beer. We're about to release Oktoberfest.
Let's go.
So we're gonna do a quick plug. We're gonna do a dope Oktoberfest here. It's gonna suck because it's socially distanced and not Oktoberfesty at all. But you can rent a table here and get your own personal keg on the table, 10-liter keg. So get a group of 6 people, get a 10-liter keg, get a 3-hour slot, eat some food, drink some beer, pretend like it's normal when it's not.
I like it. I like it a lot. Check out the link to their website. I'm sure you'll find all the information there in the comments. Ashleigh, you have a great day. I really appreciate being on.
No, you as well. Thank you so much. Have a great one.
All right. Cheers. Take care. All right, everybody. Ashleigh Carter, co-owner and head brewer at Bierstadt Lagerhaus, Denver, Colorado. Great episode. People in beer just, they're dynamic, and I really appreciate talking to them. I'm so grateful for all the interactions that I've had over the years and how much beer and food especially has meant to my personal and career path. So yeah, Best Served Podcast 209, the dream to make pilts every day with Ashleigh Carter, again, of Bierstadt Lagerhaus. It's Best Served Chilled channel. I'm super excited about it. You're going to see a lot more from this channel. We focus on kind of those craft beverage producers and professionals in the space. And so thank you, everybody, for tuning in today. Cheers.